Well, hello and welcome. Welcome to this event this evening, which is The Wisdom of Dependence, part 4 in a series of 4 delivered by Dr. Neufeld. The first 3 here in New Zealand were delivered as part of our keynote in our online conference this year. But this particular section of it, this part is focused on the wisdom of dependence in adulthood. Now, it's a little bit counterintuitive because we have enough trouble getting our heads around our kids depending on us, especially when they're teenagers, for example. We think it's really most important that they become independent, not dependent. And this is something we talk about in other places and spaces. But dependence in adulthood, my goodness, that feels like an absolute some kind of blasphemy, something terrible that we should not be saying. So we're going to explore this idea tonight. And before I move to the recording of Dr. Neufeld presenting his presentation, I'm going to start by talking a little bit about cascading care, which is a construct he brings up, but he doesn't embellish. He does embellish it in other places. So I thought I would do that for you here. So cascading care, I want you to have a picture of a waterfall. You know how it lands on a medium place, and then it can sometimes land a little bit lower and land a bit lower and then flow into the rest of the river. So think of that sort of cascading idea. And the idea of cascading care is that when we, particularly as parents, are absolutely caught up emotionally and with all our time and all our energy and our children's needs, which can be enormous, particularly if we have a child with quite a lot of needs, we end up feeling absolutely swallowed in it, and we need care. And what we're often told is self-care is the thing. You need to learn to take care of yourself. Now, there is some wisdom in that, but this idea of cascading care is, rather than taking ourselves off and doing stuff for ourselves, with ourselves, on our own, but that we lean on the other adults around us, or the people around us, the things around us that can hold us, so that their care is cascading to us and our care is cascading onto our children. Now, even our children, their care can cascade onto their dolls, their pets, or older teens can be if they're babysitters or with younger siblings. That cascade carries on down. And it's quite a beautiful construct. You see, what Dr. Neufeld talks about is that when we say, oh, I need a break from you, to a child, or if they hear us saying to our partner, I've got to get away, I've just got to get away from them, I can't handle this anymore, there's a real sense in the child of, they can't handle me, I'm too much for them. This is obviously a real trial, it's a burden, and they can actually pull back. And one thing that can do to the relationship is make the child stop wanting to depend on us, because there's a sense that they're more than we can handle. And it can put a child into an alpha mode, which we talk about a lot in other places in this paradigm. But if we consider it as cascading care, the whole thing starts to feel and look different. So we need to think, who can I take my needs to that's not my child? Because taking our needs to our own child, our neediness for time, attention, a listening ear, it's not going to go very well. It's not really in the right order. But who can we confide in? It could be a parent, it could be a partner, it could be a close friend, an aunt, an uncle, a relative. It can even be somebody who has passed away. Now, that might sound a bit odd, but when somebody has really held you, invited you into relationship with them with care and kindness, that sits in our emotional memory in a way that doesn't disappear. The rest of our life, we know what that felt like to be invited by that person, and we can actually go back to that place of feeling held, feeling loved by that person, whether they're still with us on earth or not. Another place Dr. Neufeld talks about going to, if you cannot find a person who will hold you, is to find a place of faith. Do you have a construct of God, the universe, something bigger than yourself that you can lean on, that you can go to find that refuge and support? Because we need to take those internal emotional needs to somebody else, that we can lean on them. The thing is, leaning on other people is vulnerable. I know that for myself, I resist leaning on other adults quite often. I don't like it. It makes me feel like I'm in a needy position that they've somehow got power over me. I get a little bit tetchy about it. I don't want to give that power to someone who I'm not sure if they'll really hold me and make me feel safe enough. But if we do find that person who can give us an invitation that is deep enough and make us really feel like we can find a refuge, emotional refuge there, then we get to really find a place for our feelings to release and to bounce back, and we find our resilience and our recovery in that relationship. So rather than going to self-care, we can think of it sometimes if we don't have a place that we can take our needs, we think of it as self-sacrifice. So when we talk about going into not self-care, but self-sacrifice, that thing people will say, well, that's not exactly finding your needs met. The thing is that there's this amazing thing that happens when we're in a really caring position with other people and we're giving out to them. It can really fill us up. If we know we're meeting a child's needs or a friend's needs, there's something very satiating, very satisfying in that. And in that fulfillment and in that self-sacrifice, we can actually find our own needs met to an extent. What about if we can't even find that? What do we need to do? Not self-care, but grieving the lack of being taken care of. The people who we didn't find were there for us when we needed them. If we were never given it ourselves by the people we wished we had been given it by, the people who brought us up, our caregivers, our precious ones, if we were never given it, we must be able to find our tears to grieve what we were not given. And there's a great sense of inner rest in being and doing for others what was not embodied and given to you, as I said earlier. So there's ways that we can get around this. But one other thing I just want to emphasize is that even if we don't think we have the people around us that we thought we did who would take care of our needs, we can find that village. There's always a village around us. I have a lot of faith that there will always be people around us who can be there for us if we look hard enough. We sometimes do have to put some effort in to finding our village. I've actually written an article on my website about finding your village. Is it the other mums and dads on the cricket team or the hockey team with your child? Is it the neighbor? Is it who can you find? And actually often it's not so much about the fact there's no one there, it's more about the fact, do we really trust? Do we really want to let people in? Do we want to make ourselves vulnerable and ask for help? These things are very important because giving out to a child is enormous. It's a huge giving that we give from our emotions and our well-being, and we need to fill our tank with that cascading care so we can continue to pay it on. And I want you to think of receiving and accepting from other adults and leaning on them as not something you need to pay back, but something that we do that pays forward. It flows out of us from what we have received. We give on and we give on, and it's this beautiful cascading cycle that carries on rather than this idea I must pay back the person who gave to me and now it's a two-person closed circuit and that's the end of it. There's something so beautiful about just giving on, giving out and giving on, and knowing that it will come and be given on in its own cycle in the right way and the right time. So look, I'm going to end my little talk there and I'm going to bring up Dr. Neufeld. Enjoy this fabulous talk.
Welcome back. One of the huge areas that I really didn't get a chance to address, although I think if you read between the lines, you would have been able to figure it out in the first presentation, the conference keynote was, well, is there wisdom of dependence? Is there wisdom independence in adulthood? Like, okay, we can see it in childhood. We can see it is that we need to get our dependents to depend upon us. But what about when we're adults, when we're so-called grown up, especially when there's neither the luxury of alpha caring individuals in one's life, to depend upon. We find ourselves alone. We're at the top of this cascading care arrangement. There's no one to lean upon. What about then? So I wanted to take a few moments a few minutes, really, more minutes than that. But I wanted to take some minutes in just touching on these. For those who have been through the courses, you'll anticipate what I'm going to say, but I think it's a good reminder either way. And the answer is absolutely. There is wisdom, independence, and adulthood. But let me sketch out of why that is and how that is. And so how dependence is an answer in adulthood. Now I'm going to use the 4 cardinal positions, which I often do. I use usually 3 for understanding, going around, circumnavigating, but 4 for application because you want to cover the arena. And so again, the 4 cardinal positions. The north position, of course, is usually what we think of as the most obvious. It's symbolic, at least, of where we look to get our bearings, what seems to us to be most true, what is to be aimed for, and this is, of course, the if there is still a way as an adult to embed ourselves in cascading care in some way. When attaching in the dependent mode to those to whom we trust to take care for us and about us. And I'll add the caveat a little bit later on, making ourselves somewhat easy to carry. First of all, the first part. So many of us are allergic to dependence. So many of us have become ashamed of our dependence. We have been so immersed in this doctrine of dependence that we don't wear it well. And it makes it difficult for those who care about us, care for us, but it also makes it difficult for ourselves. We don't get to receive the care we need because we're not leaning into it, because we're simply not entrusting ourselves into that care. And so it's always important if we can embed ourselves in that way. So much is made about self-care these days, and in terms of adults, thinking that that is the answer. And again, it's cascading care. Even if what we're depending upon is relationships in which those who cared for us are no longer with us. The good thing about a relationship is it's forever. And if we felt cared for, if we felt invited to exist in the other's presence, if we felt that we mattered, that we belonged, that can nurture us, whether the person is there or not. Because remember, this is about relationship. And the thing about relationship is it's forever, for better or for worse. But it's forever. Death doesn't take that away. And so finding a way to lean, if we have a God, remember that it only makes sense in the fact that God would be yearning to take care of us. But we need to lean. We need to trust. We need to lean into it, to entrust ourselves in it. Tokyo Doi, in Japanese, in a psychiatrist who wrote a book on the anatomy of dependence, speaks about adult dependence in the Japanese culture and how the Japanese understand that as they grow older, they must somehow make themselves easy to be carried, to be taken care of. That there is dignity in it. There is not a loss of dignity, not shame, but there is dignity in that process. And that has to do with making ourselves somewhat easy to carry. In our culture, independence is so revered, so focused on, that again, when it comes time that we at least lose our physical independence, it is so hard to lean into those who care for us and who are there to take care of us. So that if there is a way, even if it is leaning on relationships with those who are no longer with us, but for whom we felt cared for, lean into them. Absolutely lean into them, because it is far more important to feel cared for than to learn the skills of self-care, which take us out of that arrangement, instead of bring us into the cascading care where nature can truly take care of us. Now we go to the south position. The south position, of course, when we think of a campus, rarely gets its due, because in the normal scheme of things, especially in a compass, it's simply the opposite of what's being pointed to. What's being pointed to, of course, is our needs here to be taken care of. But as was mentioned in the beginning part of this series, in the beginning keynote, the opposite is true as well. That is, dependence is an answer in being able to invite dependence and to take care of that dependence. There is a sense of dignity, fulfillment. We talked about how I just mentioned how it stretches us. And it sets the stage also as we move to take care of our dependence. It will bring us echoes, shades, understandings of what it may be that we didn't receive. And that sets the stage for grieving, which is important, because if we don't grieve it, we're continue to act out of it. We're continue to look for things that may have been long gone. And so nature takes care of us as we take care of others. That's an incredible design. It takes care of us as we take care of others. There's a sense of fulfillment there, an incredible sense of meaning. They're stretching into our full potential. And there's a sense, again, of being able to receive the care that nature has for us. So the challenge for us as we age is to live more in the alpha caring mode, to get plugged into the giving end of cascading care. It becomes the elderly, so to speak, to give the care where they can. I'm reminded of my mother continually in this when I think of this. At 93 years of age, she was full of the dignity of giving care. She got involved in a program where mothers who were somewhat isolated, they were not hooked into any kind of cascading care, a program to matchmake them with those who had care to give. And my mother was those who had care to give. And the dignity it brought, the fulfillment it brought, the meaning it brought to the elderly, the surrogate grandchildren that she had, that brought honor to her. This is something that we need to be restored. Indigenous cultures, again, are more intuitive about this. It is the elderly that we must look to. We must lean into that. We must lean into their care, into their wisdom, because it becomes them. It dignifies them. They're cloaked in our dependence, which is a good thing, not a bad thing. It's because it's a good thing. Now, there's an east to this. And when I was thinking of an east to this, I thought, well, that's where the sun rises. That represents the future. And the future is, is there room for the unfolding of potential for independent functioning? Is there still room? We're 40 years of age, we're 50 years of age. Can we still become more our own person, think our own thoughts, have our own, know our own values? Is there still room to become more independent? Now, with regards to the relational needs, to the togetherness needs, this is where we have the idea of self-care or independence of care. It's really a misnomer. Remember that our togetherness needs, our relational needs, these are significance, love, belonging, affection, sameness, the invitation to exist in another's presence. These are functions of relationship. So the question is, Well, it's only as our relationship with ourself grows and matures does it become possible for us to depend upon ourselves. Now, notice the change in construct here. It becomes more possible for us to lean on ourselves, to depend upon ourselves, for the I to invite the me to exist, in the presence to express. There's a benevolent relationship with there only as it matures. So with regards to our core attachment dependencies, our need for togetherness, these are met in relationship, but yes, they can be met in relationship with to ourselves. Becoming less dependent upon others is a possibility. This usually requires more time than most of us have, even a lifetime. When I look at myself, I think maybe another 2 or 3 lifetimes. Well, I don't have that. It's a rare individual indeed who can truly invite themselves to exist and make room for the expression of their existence without depending upon others to support it, to past relationships at all. Although this is a value, and we should call it what it is, to depend upon myself, to invite myself to exist. It's also important to realize that it's not an achievement. We never get there. We only move closer in that process as we take on a relationship with ourselves. And we can also lean on past invitations from loved ones to be able to support us in this. And so it's self-dependence, really, and that's a function of a relationship with ourselves. That takes a lifetime, and as I said, probably much more. So it is truly better that, well, put it this way. It is true that the better the relationship we have with ourselves, the more able we are to be our own answer to the hungers we usually like to take to others for significance, love, and understanding. And the more independent we are in our sense of worth and dignity, the less dependent we are on others to treat us in certain ways. But let's be somewhat realistic to us. While we know that this is a yearning, this is not an accomplishment. And it is self-dependence, not independence, that it is all about. One more direction here, the West. The West, the sun has set, or the sun will set. Well, the sun has set on a lot of things in our life. A lot of things. And the sun has set, especially in places where perhaps we could have depended, we should have depended. Somebody should have been there for us to depend upon. Maybe it was not safe to do so. Perhaps our brains saved us from vulnerability by backing us into alpha instincts prematurely. Now we have developed an allergy to depending. Perhaps we find difficulty leaning and trusting. And again, I'm going to suggest here that our brains may have backed us into a resistance to depending, but we still have to go back to the beginning. We still have to go back to the beginning. What saved us then may very well impede us now. We need to grieve what could have been that never was. So again, independence in this way is rooted in dependence, either satisfied, as I talked about in the first part, or, and I'm going to use a term here to parallel, sadness-filled. Now, some of you know, as I've talked about in other places, that sate and sad come from the same Latin word, which means turning point. And this is indeed the turning point from dependence to independence. It's a turning point. But instead of sadness, instead of satisfied, for humans at least, there's a back door. We have so much potential to be realized. I'm so thankful there's a back door. There's a back door because it doesn't always go. There's not somebody to lean upon. There was not, in that space where we should have been taken care of, there was no one in that space. No one stepped forward. Or maybe they abuse the alpha to lord it over us, not to take care of us. Or maybe they used our need for love and approval against us, withholding until we did their bidding, whatever it is. It is now time that we need to grieve that part, to fill what could have been with sadness, because only in sadness is there letting go. Only in sadness can nature again say, okay, I've got this. I can take this. Either way. Either way. Satisfied or sadness filled. We can go to fuel the separate functioning that is still there to be realized. We've got to go back to the beginnings. I'm reminded of Alfred Lord Tennyson's In Memoriam to his beloved friend Arthur Hallam, where he has that well-known quote, well-known, "It is better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all." That's an incredible insight. And the parallel here, as I see it for humans, it is better to depend and be keenly disappointed than not to have depended and thus be stuck in unrealized potential. For most of us, this is homework to do. The West is where the sun has set and will set. These are things we can no longer change. Those are bygones. But that doesn't mean that they are not the answer to unrealized potential for separate functioning in ourselves. We just have to go back to grieving the dependencies that could have been, that should have been, that were not. And that sadness, too, will open the door to the unfolding of independence for us. Oh, I know this touches on so many things. There's so much more we could. This is we could go. Well, this is what therapy is about. But we could go all over the place. But I wanted to touch in these four cardinal positions. You see, nature hasn't left us as adults. Nature is taking care of us still. Nature's got this. And we can lean into the construct of dependence. And it's a lot better construct to think about. Either way, we can go into that. But it all starts, you see, it's rooted in dependence. The construct of it, leaning into it one way or another. Well, on that note, I have one more slide that I was playing with here and didn't really develop in any way. But it struck me that the denial of dependence is the mark of our time. It's ubiquitous. Now, I'm thinking of this like the denial of death. Ernest Becker's, where he was that great student of Carl Jung's, where denial of the ultimate separation has devastating impact. It arrests our growth. It impedes the spontaneous unfolding of our potential, because death must frame life. That is the ultimate truth, is that to live is to face death, is to face ultimate separation. And as such, dependence is a reality of life. It is a fact of life. The denial of which appears to be the norm in our society, both as a construct, as I said, as well as our own dependence. Many of us are obsessed with not being a weight, not taking up any space, with not having to be carried. And so just some thoughts on this. Denying dependence as an inherent and inescapable reality of human nature, like a plant dependent upon Mother Earth. It just is. It just is. The time and space it needs to set the stage for the unfolding of potential. This is where the whole viability as a separate being is rooted in. These are the relationships needed. We need to give dependence a shame-free existence. Oh my goodness, does it need a shame-free existence to keep it from being covered up. The invitation it needs to preserve the dignity of the one that is depending as the essential starting place for attachment and development. We couldn't start friendships, true friendships. We couldn't court our partner in our partnerships without saying, you can depend upon me. You can lean on me. I'll take care of you. And if we don't have that, it's a non-starter. If somebody can't say that to us, we shouldn't even be thinking of that as a viable attachment friendship, a viable attachment partnership. It's a starting place. I'll take care of you. You can lean on me. You can depend upon me. We deny it the satisfaction it requires to not result in stuckness or demanding. It needs time. Again, when we talked about the in the part about the receptacle of care, when in doubt, pour more care in. You want overflow. It's the overflow of care that fuels the unfolding of our potential. And of course, denying our own dependence renders us stuck and not feeling cared for, as well as in perverted and depersonalized dependencies that are addictive and insatiable. They've got to be personal. They've got to be attached where there's alpha caring. Otherwise, the caring is not received. It's not felt. It's insatiable. Interferes with the making and preserving of fulfilling attachments. And finally, it denies those who invite us to depend upon them the satisfaction of their care being received, as well as the dignity and fulfillment of being depended upon. So yes, our challenge is to look dependence right in the eye, to face the reality. It's not something to be ashamed of or that needs to be overcome. We need to make friends with dependence as a reality, and our dependence as an extension of that reality. We need to stop being so afraid of it. We need to invite it, to embrace it, because unless we do, we will neither experience the satiation that comes when we experience dependencies fulfilled, or experience the fruit of it in others when we take care of the dependencies we have invited. Thank you.
Wow, welcome back. That was lovely, and I'll invite you, Rosie, to bring your screen up too. I'll just invite Rosie at the stage because you're being recorded. Sorry, Karen, I just don't want you to not accidentally come onto our video. And before I hand over to you, Rosie, I'm just left with that image of our cup being filled by the love and care of others when we depend on them, and what we give out just flows out from that overflowing cup. And it's so different from this metaphor or this image of, well, I've got to somehow fill up my own emotional needs and everyone else's, and it starts to feel like everything's on our shoulders. And there's something just very gracious and very generous about this idea of our cup is filled by those we lean upon, and it flows out to those that we love and take care of. Over to you, Rosie. You're muted, Rosie. You'll just need to unmute. There you
Sorry
go.
about that. Yes, plenty to think about. Really interesting to apply these attachment paradigm and look at it through the whole lifespan. And I think the things that have stood out to me is this concept of fulfillment, and also the idea of fulfillment through grieving. I think it's just such an interesting and probably very poorly understood concept in our culture. So the idea that we're fulfilled when we're in dependent mode, and then somebody meets our attachment needs, so that leads to fulfillment. But also, he's saying, well, we can find fulfillment when we're in the alpha mode. We're attaching in the alpha mode through meeting the needs of others, and whether it's as parents or as children of aging parents, and it made me think of my 95-year-old mother, who's still living at home and has quite a degree of independence, but increasingly has had to be independent mode. And for me, I'm very grateful that she's lived a long life, because it's given me the chance, as he says, to stretch and grow myself to become the alpha caregiver in that relationship, and and then experience the fulfillment of that. So fulfillment by independent mode, fulfillment in alpha mode, but then all through this lifelong process of attachment is this concept of grieving, and which in Dr. Neufeld's words leads to fulfillment through the back door. So it's when we find the sadness about the things, that the ways in which our attachment needs weren't met. And this may well be in our relationship with our parents, as we look to and become the alpha as they're aging. It can be very hard, and a lot of stuff can come up for us that about the ways in which we weren't cared for ourselves. And unless we can grieve this, we will be we will be grudging carers. And so, but the wonderful thing is that through experiencing sadness, we can come to what he calls fulfillment through the back door. So there was just the last thing I wanted to say also on the same topic, to age well is also to be able to grieve the losses that are part and parcel of life's journey. I'm well into my 60s now, and nearer 70, and there are losses and lacks. Your skin, your faculties, your energy. And we just need to keep that soft heart and be able to experience the sadness of aging ourselves. And I think unless we do, we will not be able to be able to receive the care in our older age that others are offering to us. We will be prickly and difficult, and perhaps stuck in that alpha mode of not being able to receive care. So there's this lovely ideas of fulfillment all through this talk, and these concepts, but also the idea of how important grieving is for us in so many ways. And if we grieve, we keep our soft hearts, we're adaptable, and can fulfill these different roles in life. So I guess those were my thoughts as I listened to it tonight.
Thank you, Rosie. I appreciate your reflections, and I'm going to turn it over to each of us to have a little bit of a think about what hit us from today. But for those of you who are joining us on the recording after the event, thank you for being with us, and I'm going to stop the recording now.